Welcome to the J&J Show. I'm Jeff, he's Jerry, and today we're going to be talking about how the enemy uses distraction techniques to try and knock us off course when especially when we're trying to do work for the Lord and trying to carry out his plan for our life. And the enemy's been doing a really good job with me this year. It's been a rough start to 2023. I won't go into too many specific details, but let's just say the enemy's knocked me off course a couple of times, and every time I try to right the ship, seems like every little thing goes wrong. But Jerry, I think he said that you've kind of experienced the same thing that I've been going through, but it's been kind of tough so far.
My stuff hasn't been quite as serious as yours, but I've still had things that you just don't want to have to deal with, headaches and whatnot, that unnecessary headaches, and but you just have to kind of grin and bear it. It's one of those things where I remember my dad was really big into his motto was, not complain, don't complain, don't ever complain. And so he tried his best to grill that into me as much as possible. So I try. I got teeth marks where I bite my bottom lip a lot. So it's but it's he's right. It's important to, you can get upset and you can get frustrated, but it's really important to not complain.
Right, because if you start to complain, you start to let it get to you, then the enemy starts to win, and you get further and further knocked off course. And that's just exactly what they want you to do. They want you to dwell on it. They want you to give in to that. Just give in to the. I guess it can really turn into self-pity and sorrow, and it can turn into what's the word I'm trying to think of here? Really just I don't want to say self-loathing, but just where you get down on life and you start to really, and I don't want to use the word hate, because that hasn't been the case in my circumstances here, but a lot of people do. Eventually it wears on them. It wears on them. They get down and they become so cynical, I guess is the word I'm trying to think of. They're cynical and they start to hate everything, and
right.
That's exactly what the enemy wants. So yeah, in a way, like you said, you got to grin and bear it. You just got to realize that, we go through storms in our lives, and we just got to keep our eyes on the Lord when we do, and just know that he'll get us through it.
And it's also, I think, really important, to go through the process when something happens and it takes a little bit of time. I wouldn't recommend that, I don't suggest or think that anybody could do this instantaneously, within seconds of something happening. It might take a couple hours. Everybody's different, but if you can just remind yourself, okay, this is bad, this is annoying. However, I'm not in a hospital today, and I'm not going to the hospital to visit any of my family members. So try to be thankful for that. I think the Lord appreciates and sees that you're trying to fight the battle, and that you're trying to resist the enemy's attack. And it helps you in the end, being grateful for things, even in the trying circumstances. The Bible makes it clear that the Lord really approves of that, and you'll get out of that valley quicker if you take that approach rather than the complaining approach. And we all stumble and do complain sometimes. The best thing to do is just confess it and repent of it and move on. It doesn't mean that you failed or anything like that if we happen to, because I'm speaking to myself. I certainly I could be a first-class complainer if I let myself. It's it's almost an art, and it can be funny sometimes too. Being negative can be fun, but it's a terrible thing to do. But how, especially when there's more than one person, misery loves company, and I can't think of anything more fun or therapeutic after a sports team has your sports team has lost than to go on Facebook and commiserate with other fans who are also upset. But maybe that's why we like sports, because we're able to to vent about something that's really not that important in the end. But yeah, the enemy will do that, and it's important because like I've heard a preacher say one time, if you're going to complain, you better prepare for another lap around the mountain, and because it's going to be that the Israelites spent 40 years in that desert going around that mountain because of the complaining. It just doesn't. In the end, it really doesn't accomplish anything. I know that sounds like a trite statement, but it is true. The complaining doesn't accomplish anything, and it does open up a door for the enemy to pour in. And so it's I don't know how we got off on that.
Right now, yeah, I just want to let everybody know at home that we're not going to make this the Jeff and Jerry complaining hour, so we're not going to sit here and complain about what's been going on. I don't think that make for good listening or watching. But yeah, I know the Lord will put us through storms on purpose, and He will put us in situations to try to make us grow and to learn. And sometimes it's hard to differentiate between that and the enemy trying to distract you. And I know I sure have been put up against it. I mentioned in the last episode, however long ago that was, what, year and a half ago, when we did our last episode, that injuries while working out knocked me off course. Yeah. I had computer problems. Maybe that was the Lord teaching me patience. Maybe He was trying to teach me patience, because it's always been said that if you ask the Lord for patience, He's going to put you in a situation where you're going to need it. So, maybe it was, but I don't know. You can kind of see sometimes when the Lord puts you to the test, and when it's His storm that He wants you to get through. And then there's other times when you just know that the enemy, like today, I've had a pretty long day today, and I can just tell the enemy's just nitpicking at me, just trying to chip away at my resolve, because I've resolved that today. That, of course, it happens today. Maybe it is the Lord trying to teach me patience, but I resolved today that I'm not going to let it get to me. So, of course, every little thing that can go wrong, and every little thing there's just it's easy to sit here and try to blame it on the enemy. I really think most of it is they're just trying to chip away at me. But then again, patience has never been really my strong suit either. So maybe it is the Lord putting me in those situations to try to learn that patience.
No, it's I remember one time a pastor that actually was ahead. In other words, my pastor that runs the church I go to, he has another pastor that he respected, that he had to keep oversight over him, because he wanted to be accountable to somebody. So it's kind of we're not part of a denomination, we're non-denominational. So he had this other pastor that he respected, that he could go to if he had a question or an issue, and he would bring this other pastor in to oversee the books and to make sure everything at our church was going. It was just an accountability thing. But anyhow, that other pastor, I remember him talking one time about going up into the mountains just to get away and to pray, and going to a cabin, and he was going to seek the Lord about something really important and try and pray about it. And he said everything that could go wrong went wrong. I think he got a flat tire right before he got up there, and then started raining. Then he couldn't get, I guess all the firewood was gone, so he was freezing. And it was just one thing, and then another, and then another. And a couple of years later, he was in a situation, and I believe it was a deliverance situation, where he was in the process of casting a demon out of this person. And the thing began to speak to him and say, I know who you are. And I saw you that day at the cabin, and we tried. Basically said, because it's been 15 years to heard the story. Basically, the demon spoke and said, we tried our best to get under your skin. And at that point, he told the thing to be quiet, but he nevertheless took note that all those things had in fact been done by the enemy just to try to knock him off course. And this thing was actually admitting that. And so what I took away from that story was that sometimes, and it's not every time, you're 100% right, that it's not all the time. If I'm fishing and I miss a fish, I don't assume that the devil has knocked the fish off my lure. I mean, that's just ridiculous. But like you just said, you can tell when it's coming in waves, and you can almost sense, and it's because it's not isolated. One isolated thing is normal to happen. It's going to happen. You drop a glass and break it or whatever. But when it's one thing and then another and then another, that's when you know that you're dealing with an attack. And really, at that point, the best thing to do is to pray about it. And then there's, grinning and bearing it is part of it. Because I think it's a disservice to claim that, just smile and not let it bother you. Well, it's not quite that easy. These guys know what they're doing, and they know how to get under our skin. They know how to agitate us. And so a lot of times it's not as easy as just smiling and being happy about it. It really, you have to grit your teeth and tell yourself, you know what? I know what this is, and I'm not going to allow it to control me. I know if I just pray to the Lord and keep focused, eventually this storm will break. And I've found for myself that that's how I have to get through those. My personality is not the type where I can just start whistling and be happy and whatnot when everything is going wrong. I mean, other people can do that, I guess. And I think there's some people who say they can do it until they find themselves in that situation. We don't want to be like Job's friends. That's like Job's friends who came and they're, when I read Job, I used to always wonder what was so wrong with his friends, because everything that his friends said was true. If you read and at the end, God tells them that they had spoke falsely. Well, they had just spent whole chapters saying true things about God. And then it dawned on me one day, it wasn't that what they were saying was wrong, because it wasn't, it was right. The problem was they were coming from a point of all this must have been happening to Job because he had sinned somehow, and he hadn't. And that's where they were wrong. They had assumed, and we have to remember that too, if we see something bad happen to somebody, I think it's, really a bad policy to, and there's some Christians who think like this, that if something bad happened, oh, well, they must have sinned, or they must have done something to bring that. That's not always the case. Matter of fact, usually it's not the case. And so it's, we have to, I try to remember that when I see car accidents. We tend to look at those idiots they got. Well, it could be that, one of those people was probably innocent. So I try not to judge. Everybody says don't judge, but then we go out and do it. But it's a battle, and it's a battle that's tougher at times than at others. And you're talking about distractions. I think we've all encountered when you decide you're going to have prayer time or read the Bible, instantaneously something will come into your mind to go do and be a distraction. And that's why it's so important. I think we've talked about this before. That's why it's so important, I think, to get up early in the morning and do it, because there really aren't any distractions that early in the morning. There's just nothing that's going to, it's amazing the difference between trying to have devotions in the middle of the day and trying to have devotions at 0 dark 30. When it's still dark outside, it's just easy. You can just focus. There's nothing else. In the middle of the day, I always start thinking, oh, I need to do that. Oh, I can just go do this. And it's just one distraction after another. And it's not always the enemy, because, there's the enemy, but we also have our flesh and our sinful nature. And that works against us too. And it's not always the enemy. The flesh battles against the spirit, and the two war against each other. And there's no doubt, I've heard really good pastor Kent Christmas that talks about, don't think that you're a lesser of a Christian if sometimes you think to yourself, I really don't want to go read the Bible. I just don't feel like doing it. I'd rather watch TV. That's the flesh wanting to do what it wants to do. But if you press forward and don't give in to that, then that's definitely the right policy.
It's funny you mentioned that because there have been mornings that I go to read the Bible and it's like a longer chapter or a longer verse, or well, I won't say verse. I normally try to at least read one chapter a day, and I'm in Psalms right now, and I'm at the part of in the second half of Psalms where it's a bunch of shorter Psalms. And I'll get used to reading two or three or four short Psalms, and then I'll get to a really long one. And it's like, I don't want to read this today. I don't want to have to read
Right.
that much. And then I catch myself and I'm like, no. And I push through it and I start to read it. And then as soon as I start to read it, that feeling just immediately goes away.
Right.
And I do. It's like you just said. I feel bad thinking that and thinking I don't want to read it today.
Right.
But it's like you said. I push through it, and um that feeling just completely goes away, and I get
Yep.
completely immersed. It's usually on those days I actually get more immersed and I get more out of my reading
Right.
than on days when I'm eager to do it. That's
And that battle, go ahead. You go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's not always the case, that I get more out of it the days that I'm trying to fight the flesh, as you say, and trying to make myself do it. There's been days where I'm very eager to read, and then I realize why. It's because God starts speaking to me through the chapters I'm reading. So
Yeah. Well, and it's not a battle. If there's anyone listening who's a young Christian, it's not a battle that you always fight. But to be honest, after the time will come when you will see the Bible very differently, and it, uh, it you don't really have those battles as much as you once did. That feeling of, oh, I don't want to read, because uh, one thing I've been talking a lot about, and this is 100% true, and I don't think a lot of Christians realize it, but it's true. The Bible, and this is going to sound obvious, but it's more than what I'm saying. The Bible is a supernatural book. And when you're reading that thing and you're processing it, I don't say you have to understand every bit, but you're paying attention, because we all can sit there and we can read, and it's not just the Bible. I can be reading a history book or something and realize that half the page I've been thinking about something else. And so if it happens when you're reading the Bible, don't beat yourself up. Just go back to where you last and focus, because we all do that. But the Bible is a supernatural book, and it is I like to compare it to supernatural gasoline. And if you're reading that, it will have a positive effect on you. It will. It's not, you don't have to. We think that we have to glean some major life lesson from it in order for it to do good. It doesn't matter. If you're reading it and paying attention, then it's going to have a positive effect. It just is. And it's supernatural. It's not because you're connecting the dots and you're understanding, and because, you know, once you've read through it and you've read the stories, you will find new stuff. It's amazing how it works. But the benefit of reading it for so many years is not because you need to read these stories over and over. It's because it is like putting spiritual gasoline in your tank. And the more you read, if you double the amount that you read, you will feel it. If somebody really wants to up there, because we talk a lot about growing closer to the Lord, really reading the Bible is the way to do it. Now, you can spend more time in prayer, and that can do it. But I would highly recommend instead that you increase the Bible reading time, not the prayer time, because if you increase the Bible reading time, you will grow closer to the Lord, and that will improve the quality of the prayer time. When I was a senior in high school, I don't know how this happened, but I got my hands on one of those Bibles, the one a day, the Bible in a year is what it was. Read through the Bible in 1 year. And it's kind of a lot each day. And I was not concerned about reading the Bible through in 1 year. That wasn't the purpose. I started reading it because it has a little bit of Old Testament, a little bit of New Testament, a Psalm, and a proverb each day. And I mean, it's not little bits. It's a pretty good amount. But I was going through and pressing through and reading an entire day's worth, and I got to where I would read a couple days worth, and it was a lot. And I mean to tell you, it was supernatural what happened. I developed this. It was bizarre because it was literally like a drinking sensation. When I was reading it, it was as if I was drinking something spiritual, supernatural, as the way I felt. And I remember my dad being really happy. But I spent most of the spring the week I was supposed to be studying for exams, all I was reading was the Bible. And it's not because I was holier than everybody else. This didn't last forever, but it was probably about a month or two where I was just, and I think something really triggered in this process. And do I read as much as now as I did then? No, unfortunately I don't. But I learned a lot during that process. I still have that book downstairs, and I always tell myself I'm going to do that again because it was unbelievable. It was absolutely unbelievable. The feeling of and how I saw it was, I was not seeing it in the same light. It was like it was just bizarre. It was crazy. It was, but in a good way. And I recommend anybody who wants to experience that. I wasn't special. What happened to anybody, but increasing the amount of Bible reading. You might say, yeah, but I'm not really getting a whole lot out of it, and I don't really understand Jeremiah. And what's Ezekiel talk? It doesn't matter if you don't understand. If you're reading it and you're trying to process, and when I mean reading it, I don't mean flying through at breakneck speed. I mean, it's not how much. How many words you process. It's, are you paying attention and spending time in reading it? And even if you don't understand what exactly, because there's a lot of Jewish anachronisms and stuff in there that we don't really understand necessarily, and it's not really important for you to. You're going to get a benefit out of reading it. And I would encourage everybody to increase the amount that you're reading and expand that, and you will feel the difference in your spiritual walk.
Going back to what you said, excuse me, about you'll start thinking about something else while you're reading, whether it be the Bible or something else. And I catch myself doing that all the time. I'll read an entire chapter and then I'll realize that I got none of it because I'm sitting there thinking about something else. And I think, to tie that back into the topic of our episode here, I think, a lot of times I'll realize what I'm thinking about that's distracting me from reading the Bible is something that, I worry about in my everyday life. It's something that sure. the enemy is, the enemy is there trying to use that to distract me from reading and, like you said, learning and drinking it up and having that spiritual awakening and the experiences that you just described. And I catch myself and then I'll go back and I'll reread it and I'll pick up something that I definitely missed before. And, I think the enemy will do that, especially like, and it usually is that way when I catch myself doing that. I'll go back and read it, and it's usually something important that I feel like the Lord wants me to know.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, the enemy's like the demon knew that preacher. And he knew right. when he was on that mountain. It's kind of like going back to when, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was Peter using Jesus' name to dispel demons, and the three men went out and tried to do that. And instead of referencing Jesus, they referenced Peter, and the demons said that they knew who Peter was. So the enemy knows who you are. They know what you're trying to do. They know that, reading the Bible is going to get you close. Not only is it going to get you closer to the Lord, but it's going to pull you further away from them. It's right. going to weaken their grip on you if they have a grip on you. And I hate to say it, but I think we all have something in our lives, some kind of vice or something that the enemy just has that grip, and right. they use it in an instant to just knock us off course. I know I've got mine. I'm sure everybody has theirs, but reading the Bible and having those spiritual experiences like you just described pulls us farther away from that. It weakens their grip on us, and it takes us closer to the Lord where we can withstand it when they do try to employ those tactics to, whatever vice it may be, whatever it is, when they do it and it has no effect. Of course, they're going to try to distract you from, reading the Bible, getting closer to the Lord. But usually I think I've just realized this, but usually, I mean, I've realized it a couple of times, but it's all starting to make sense now that we're talking about this topic. Is that usually when I get distracted like that, and I'm reading something, and I have to go back and reread it, I pick up something important that I think the Lord is trying to get through to me.
Yeah, it's you can see it actually not just on a personal level, but you can see it on a national level where this type of thing happens. I think all of us Christians who have been paying attention have been amazed at how anytime that bad actors, it seems like, are about to be brought to justice or to have their criminal activities uncovered, something happens to distract and they slip away. I've seen this happen over and over and over again on our national level, and you get to the point where you know what it is, and the devil, he knows his own, and to some extent he runs cover for his own until he's done with them, and then he kills them. And so it's these things, we talked about before, and I still think about it quite a bit. How much are there coincidences? To what degree do we believe in coincidences? Is it just a coincidence that these people, and I won't throw out any names, but you can just imagine these people who we know are crooked, always manage to skate and get away. And when they finally do seem to be dead in the sights of some form of justice, something happens and completely distracts everybody, and they slip away just like a snake through a flower bed, and they escape any sort of consequences. Now, I don't get so flustered because I realized, I guess it was probably 10 years ago, I got in a spot where I got kind of bitter about a lot of this stuff I'm talking about with the lack of I mean, I was concerned about injustice long before it became in vogue to talk about injustice, except the injustice that I was concerned about was actual injustice, where good people were having bad things happen to them, and where bad people were being blessed, it seemed. And it says in Psalms that David felt much the same way until he saw the end of the wicked, and then he said he was pretty cut to the quick. And I've really come to that same conclusion. It doesn't really matter if people have to pay the piper here on earth. It's just delaying a far worse punishment that's coming, and it is coming. They're not going to escape it. So they may get out of something here, or think they're getting away with something on planet Earth for 10 years, but it's just a minor delay of the inevitable, and it's going to be bad.
It's funny you mentioned that because I find myself getting upset about injustices like that, and then I'm more and more so since I began my journey with the Lord. I've come to realize it's like they're going to get their comeuppance. Maybe not here on Earth. Maybe they'll continue to live lavishly, and rich get richer, and they do immoral things that they're able to escape one way or another. But eventually, they're going to have to come face to face with the Lord. Right. And it always reminds me. We talked about that young man who went to hell, who had his vision, and the beginning of his vision was him face to face with the Lord, and the Lord casting him into hell. And that's what always comes to me. And it's not that the Lord will take pleasure in it. I certainly won't take pleasure in it. There's people here on earth that, I'm a little hesitant to say this, that we just don't like. They rub us the wrong way. And we definitely have our enemies. But there is no part of me that would not love to see every single one of the enemies I've had in my life, whether they're still enemies or not, in heaven. Right. I still want them to go to heaven. Sure. I may not care much for them. They may have wronged me in such terrible ways that I don't, if I never spoke to them again in this life, that would be fine with me. And I probably shouldn't be saying that sitting here as a Christian, but it's just a normal emotion. It's a normal feeling that we feel. And, it's something I've tried to work a lot on. And I've got to the point where it's like, yeah, they wronged me, but I forgive them. I forgive them, and
That's all you can do.
I would love to see them in heaven.
Right.
I would love to be able to greet them in heaven one day, but it's just it kind of comforts me a little bit when I get upset about these injustices in the world, and it's like, they may escape it here. This is the devil's domain. He has free reign here, but once this life is over, they're going to have to come face to face with the Lord, and that's when they're going to have to answer for all this stuff. And unfortunately, I don't think a lot of them will be redeemed.
And there's nothing that can happen to them here on this earth that would that's going to be as intense as what's coming. And so, and I don't say that gleefully, but it's just a fact. We look for justice here on the earth, but there really isn't anything that's going to, the real justice comes, and the word. If justice was the case, then we all deserve, except for the Lord's sacrifice, we all deserve hell as much as the next person. And so it's not really, just for Jesus to have died and experienced that horrible beating because we've messed up. And somebody will say, well, I didn't mess up. That was all Adam. Well, anybody who says that better have a sin-free life to show to the rest of us.
On that note, that I do know that people will get their comeuppance. It's not like I'm gonna be sitting there at the end all giddy with excitement, all happy that they're getting what they finally getting what they deserve. But I didn't want what I said to come across that way, where I'm going to be happy when they do meet God face to face and they do receive their final judgment, because the young man who had that vision where he went to hell, he talked about a very he talked about a very saddened God that had to cast him into hell, and he said, "I'm sorry, son," and just the remorse and the sadness that he felt from God when he said that, that's kind of how I feel about these people. It's like, yeah, they're going to get theirs in the end, but getting theirs means they're going to go to hell, which, I think is all part of, I don't want that. I definitely don't want that. And, I think that's all part of why we're here and what we're trying to do. But unfortunately, there are those that we're going to be unable to reach, and they're going to be, those that we will not be able to convince to accept Jesus. And that's all part of it. It just it's kind of sad to think about.
Yeah, it really is. And there's so much to be said on that front, and we've said it in other videos before, as far as reaching the lost. And I've heard it said, and I think it's probably true, that the United States, and to a lesser degree the West in general, is the most difficult place to try to win souls, because of the tremendous scoffing and skepticism. They say, if you go to India or Africa, people are very willing because they don't have any light or hope. And so when you offer it to them, they eagerly accept. Not everybody, that's a generalization, of course, but for the most part, there is an eagerness to accept by the people in those areas that you really don't. Westerners are too sophisticated and too smart to believe in nonsense like God. And so it's very slim pickings, it seems. And from what I can tell, a lot of the people that do come to the Lord in the West, it's a result of him specifically reaching out to them, whether they're in a real bad situation. And there are definitely people in the United States that are getting saved. There's no doubt about that. It's just a fact that there are, but it doesn't seem to really be in massive numbers, and it's dribbles. A couple here, a couple there, which is still good. I mean, there's still some amazing testimonies that are coming out even now. That's one of the things about the rapture dream phenomenon that I've really liked, is the number of people that I've heard about that have been lost until just fairly recently. And it's always, you hear about people who were, lost in the world until 2018, and when they got saved, and it's like, well, gee, I That's not that long ago. And so it's encouraging. And there's certainly the pastors and ministers are able to get through to some when they can get them into a sermon and have them hear and the Holy Spirit convict them. But it's slim pickings here. And it seems like these days it's just tough. It's not exactly my strongest subject, because I can be kind of a hard case on that sometimes because of the lack of success that I've had, not from lack of trying, but you just get to the point where when you've struck out, how many times does a batter strike out and he gets up to the plate and he just doesn't even try, so, but.
Yeah, no, it's sad how many of these, speaking of rapture dreams, how many of these stories, it's like, I was a devout atheist before I had this dream, and it takes a literal act of God to save people here in the West, whereas like you said, it's much easier in other places, but people are so, I don't know if something happens. I know a lot of them talk about how they grew up in Christian households and it was kind of a strict household, and then they get out into college or something and then they just go buck wild and they lose their way. And it's sad that it takes a literal act of God to bring them back into the fold, right, which is what, rapture dreams are. And I think it goes back to, the enemy knocking these people off course, and they get knocked off course, they become bitter, they become spiteful, and they completely turn their back on religion and the Lord.
Right.
And they get lost. And that's kind of the whole thing there, is that we're supposed to try to reach the lost, and these people, they just get so distracted by the enemy and they get so beaten down by life. And it's really easy to get beaten down by life, but it's like you said, like sometimes we go through these storms where it's not God trying to teach us something, and it is the enemy trying to get to us, and it is the enemy trying to knock us off course and trying to make us get lost. And unfortunately, there are so many people here, like you said, that they don't want to hear it. You bring up religion and they do not want to hear it, and they're so lost, and they've been beaten down by life, because that's what the enemy does. That's what the enemy does. And any soul that is lost and is a victory for them, which is what it's all about. We're trying to achieve victory for the Lord by bringing them into the light, and the enemy's trying to achieve victory by dissuading them from coming to Jesus and coming to God. And if I misspoke in any way, please let me know about that. So.
Definitely not. It's just frustrating because we're also having to battle against what organized religion has done over the centuries that has muddied the waters, and I'm not talking about the early Christian church, which was so good and so faithful. I'm talking about the powerful church that has gone in and subjugated people and tortured people and forced people. It's just and even more recently, the church, both Protestant and Catholic, have had a terrible record with abuse and just all kinds of stuff. So it's we're battling that as well. And unfortunately, the lost, they don't know about Polycarp or some of these other individuals, Antipas and some of these others who were amazing people that were great Christians, or even Reinhard Bonnke or some of these other people. No, they only know about those that were charlatans, because that's who the enemy has his media focus on, and that's what the history books focus on. And so it's that's what I mean about it can be frustrating sometimes, feeling like the deck is stacked against us on this front, and it's easy to just throw your hands up and say, you know what, it's not fun to play in a game that's rigged against you. But unfortunately, that's the hand that we're dealt, and we're not going to have a losing hand. We have a winning hand. The Lord's going to take us home, but we've got to stick it out, because there's people who are going to accept. Look at Jonah. I think Jonah is a really great bit of inspiration, because here's a guy who was fairly well convinced that nobody was going to listen to him. And he was kind of bitter about that because he felt like God was going to pardon these people anyway, and the whole thing was a waste of his time. And yet he went through, and miraculously, he didn't know there had been an eclipse that had occurred just before he arrived at Nineveh. And apparently we don't know this for a fact, but we surmise, we know there was a big eclipse of the sun that occurred, and the people seemed to really put a lot of stock in that. And then here's this guy that shows up like a day later pronouncing wrath and destruction. And so the whole city basically took his warning and got saved. And he certainly wasn't expecting that. And we don't want to be like Jonah and sit and cross our arms and make faces and get mad when other people are getting saved. We want to be ecstatic with joy, but he wasn't too happy about it. And so we have to remember that even at times when it seems like there's nothing's going to come out of this, there's always potential, because really in the end, it's the Lord moving upon people, that no one comes to the Lord except the Holy Spirit draws him. And so we never know when the Lord's exactly going to do that. So we have to carry the message as much as we can. Although I heard just today that in Israel, they've introduced a bill to make it illegal to try to spread the gospel. And so now that's introducing a bill. It hasn't been passed. It probably won't be passed. But nevertheless, that law would make it a crime to try to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ in Israel. So that's where we are in this day and age.
Yeah, I wonder why, here I mentioned before that this is the devil's domain, why a bill like that would be proposed in Israel, because, that's God's chosen land.
Right.
If, they've been up against it since the beginning, really. that's God's chosen land. So, of course, that's what the enemy is going to target. And,
Sure.
that's no surprise to me. It saddens me that something like that would be proposed, but in this day and age, in this world, it doesn't surprise me.
Well, in England, just last week, they introduced a bill that would ban silent prayer and within a certain distance of an abortion clinic. So you would not be allowed to pray silently to yourself. And of course, that begs the question, how would you determine if somebody was praying silently? I guess the answer is they would ask them, are you praying? And if you answer in the affirmative, you get jail time.
Right.
So that's one of the guys, one of the watchmen who has a channel that I like very much. I think it's Watchmen by the River is the title, but he refers to it as clown world. And that's true. I mean, we live in it seems like clown world some days. Unfortunately, it's not very funny. It's just one of the scary clowns. But the insanity that we see on a daily basis is just begars description.
Yeah, it's more like that clown from It.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Not the one from Seinfeld. Not Eric.
Eric the clown. Yeah. Or
he put the fire out with his big shoe.
Or Bozo, who George is hung up on. Yeah. No, but yeah, it is a sad state of affairs, and it's reached this point because people have been knocked off course by the enemy. The enemy's got their grasp on them, and they were able to drag them down and distract them and turn them away from the Lord. So it's only going to get worse, though, unfortunately, before Jesus comes.
And it really has. It has gotten. If folks are kind of wondering, I guess, why we're kind of pontificating like this, since our last show, it really has gotten considerably, the international state of things has gotten much worse. And I would dare say I've never seen it quite like this right now. I mean, it's just across. I mean, we've had the earthquake since our last show where over 50,000 people were killed. And then we have every single day now, we have an earthquake of at least 6.0 magnitude or higher in some country. Nothing like this has ever happened before. It's exactly what Jesus said. It is just a constant earthquake rumble in one country or another. And then you have Israel, like you just said. Israel is in the worst place it has been in our lifetimes as far as rioting inside of Israel, that they're about to come to like a civil war type blow. Then they got Hezbollah and whatnot firing rockets, and the Ramadan coming up, and then they have Iran is developing its nuke, and now Russia and Syria are threatening Israel. It's just unreal, the mess that Israel is in at this point. And so and then you have the banking situation that is unprecedented. We really haven't seen anything like this in a long time, where the banks are just collapsing the world over, and it's unreal. I mean, it's unbelievable how things have gone down the road even further since our last, and significantly. I don't mean just a little bit, but significantly down the road towards Bible prophecy, and as far as us looking up and expecting the Lord, I would say that we're a long ways down the road from where we were when we just did our last video a month or so ago.
It's really interesting. You had told me about the earthquakes and how they're happening more and more frequently, and it's definitely a sign of the times. Like you said, Jesus spoke specifically about that, didn't he?
Yep. He said there'll be earthquakes in various places, wars and rumors of wars. It's not just that we have some wars going on, but it's the threats. Everybody's threatening everybody else. I mean, every day you have countries threatening other countries. It's just every single day somebody's threatening to attack these people, and they're threatening to attack them, and it's just unreal. And you put all these things together, and with Israel being our barometer, if you will, for end times events, with it in almost complete upheaval, they're barely keeping a lid on it in Israel right now. And the Ramadan starts next week. That there's sure to be fireworks with that, and the whole area is a powder keg waiting to go off right now. And so it's all of it's going on at the same time, and it's and there's even more that's going on with the food supply. That's it's just unreal. I've never seen anything like it. And if anybody is holding off on getting right with the Lord until a later date, I would not advise that, because at this point, honestly, I think that we're in the red zone as far as. I just don't. None of us know how long we have, but it's never been like this. And even I was talking to Amy the other day, and we're talking about 2.5 years since I first realized where we were in the end times, and 2.5 years have passed, and it hasn't backed off. If anything, right now, like I said, it is clearly. And then in other things too, like there's just the rise of wickedness is astounding. I mean, it's mind-boggling. Even from whether it's the Grammys, or whether it's what's going on in the schools, or whether it's a complete and total breakdown of any sort of rational decency. You can't even hardly put words to it. It's just, all you can do is shake your head. And so I would not play games with the Lord right now. There was one watchman that I watched, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend this, but I kind of sympathized with the guy, and he just lost it in one of his recent videos, and just was letting it rip, telling people that they best not be messing around with the Lord, right? And except he was using some pretty strong, pretty foul language, and I'd never really seen anything quite like that. But I don't cast stones at the guy, because he was just being real. It's like, listen, you people are messing around with the Lord and thinking you're going to jerk his chain, and he's coming, and it's going to be bad news. And except he was filling this with very colorful expletives and whatnot. And it's crazy times. It is crazy times.
I think that too is, people waiting to get right with the Lord is like, I'm just not ready yet. I think that is definitely another distraction technique by the enemy.
Right.
They get that false sense of security. It's like, oh, I still have time. You still have plenty of time. And it's that little voice in the back of their head. But guess who it is? It's the enemy trying to prevent them from taking the steps needed to be saved. Because, again, they don't want to lose. See, to them, it's to us, it's saving them from the enemy, saving them from hell. To them, it's losing them to the light, and they don't want to lose that person. So they're going to sit there and feed that false sense of security into them telling them, "Oh, it's okay. You still got time. You can continue to live your life just the way you want to, the way you see fit." And you still have time to get right with the Lord. Now's not the time. You're not ready, because isn't that something you've said that you've heard personally? Is people have told you that
Oh,
they're just not. I'm just not ready yet. And it's like, well, what are you waiting on? But
yep.
it's the
And
enemy.
some of them, it's actually a sense of decency in them. They feel like they can't come to the Lord until they clean their act up. And so it's not a matter of them wanting to sin and whatnot. It's a sense of like shame or guilt. And it's actually an admirable quality in them that they want to come to the Lord, in a clean state, but you can't do it that way. No, nobody can do it that way. He does that for you. That's the whole purpose, is you come to him and he cleans you up. So if you're thinking you're going to get right and then come to him and be justified, that's not how it works. It's never going to happen. He actually is eager to clean you up himself. That's his specialty. It's what he does. And so I understand why non-Christians will say that. I really do, because they feel embarrassed or shit. But listen, they need to remember that all of us have had to come to the Lord with problems. Nobody's are any worse. Look at Paul, and he had persecuted the church. I don't really know if Paul had ever actually killed any Christians. It doesn't actually say that in the Bible anywhere. It does allude to he pursued them in a murderous way or whatnot, but it never actually defines him killing. But he certainly was standing there approving of them killing Stephen, and he had a whole bunch of them thrown in jail and was hunting them down and harassing them. He was a bad character, and he wound up getting saved. The Lord didn't say, well, this guy clearly you can't be saved. Lord welcomed him right in and used him. Same with John Ramirez in our more modern times. The guy was the arch Satanist witch doctor in New York City, and used to get rich putting spells on people and doing just vile things. And he ends up getting saved. And now he's out there working for the Lord, exposing the tactics of the enemy. So don't think you're worse than anybody else that's had to come to the Lord, because all of us, all sin is not the same, but all sin is sufficient to keep us out of the Lord's presence without the blood of Jesus. Even lies, even small things, is enough to separate us from him. So for anybody who's like, well, I just don't, I'll come to the Lord when you're not guaranteed tomorrow. There's no guarantee. Look at those people with the earthquake. Over 50,000 people had no idea. When that earthquake happened, I thought to myself, last week, all those people were still alive, and now they're all gone. They had no idea whatsoever that was coming. And within a week's time, gone. Over 50,000. It's unbelievable. And so none of us are guaranteed tomorrow or even the next 5 minutes. And it's a dangerous game to put it off. It really is, because you just don't know. People get killed in car accidents. I'm not trying to be morbid, not trying to scare anybody, but we're not guaranteed the next breath.
There's a reason why the saying is out there: "Come as you are. Come as you are." That's what the Lord wants you to do. He doesn't, that's what it's all about. It's all about forgiving of your sins, and he will forgive you your sins. But in that same breath, you have to forgive yourself.
Right.
And a lot of times the enemy plays on that. I'm not saying it's like that with your friends, because, when you explain it that way, it is kind of admirable that they would want to clean themselves up for the Lord before they present themselves to the Lord. Because I've been through times where it's, I won't say difficult for me to turn and pray to the Lord, but it's kind of difficult in the sense that don't feel worthy enough to talk to him or to look him in the eye, or and I get that. I get that you don't want to stand before Jesus one day and feel dirty and rotten because of your sins. And you want to be able to look him in the eye with a clean slate. But the catch-22 of that is, he is the one who gives you that clean slate. God is the one who gives you that clean slate. So you're not going to do it yourself. Right. And the enemy knows this all too well, and they will sit there and they will harp on you about sins. And, if you try to catch yourself beating yourself up over a sin, that's the enemy trying to get at you, trying to harp on you, trying to chip away at your armor, because, you're not worthy enough for the Lord. Look at what you've done. You do this. You continually you're a habitual sinner. You're habitually crossing that line, and they will harp on those sins, and they will try to again distract you from turning to the Lord with your sins, which is what He wants you to do. Come as you are. He will cleanse you. You don't have to cleanse yourself. That's the whole thing. Jesus sacrificed Himself to cleanse us all. But the thing is that you have to, and I get it. You want to be clean for the Lord, but the only way to be clean for the Lord is to come to the Lord as you are.
Yep. Yep. That's 100% true. It's kind of a, like you said, the catch-22. And we've, earlier we're talking about, people and going their own way and whatnot. And we've all been there. I mean, all of us have been, at some point. I don't really know anybody who was born a Christian and stayed that way until death. I mean, we've all had, even if they were brief, we've had periods where we were in rebellion or we were ignoring God, that we were in a place that not a good place, a place that we shouldn't have been, and we had to come to Him. And so it's something that just about everybody that I know of, that I've ever heard of, has a testimony that involves at least at some point backsliding or wandering away, like you were talking about, where they had been raised in a Christian family and then went off to college and were led astray by the temptations of the world. And some of the people are fortunate, blessed enough to come back out of that, and others it claims them. They never recover from it. And so it's
well, that's actually where my personal testimony begins. Is I strayed. I never outright turned my back on the Lord. I never denounced my Christianity, but I did stray, and I did let the enemy distract me. I let this world, lead me away from the path that, I look back and I kind of want to kick myself because I could have been on this path the entire time. But at the same time, the Lord used that. I'm not saying He wanted me to stray or He wanted me to do any of the things I did, but He uses that now as a teaching thing for me. And I kind of had to go through that to get and be where I am now. But like you said, that's pretty much where my testimony begins. Is I had strayed from the Lord, and He welcomed me back with open arms in an instant. It did take some work. I will say, yeah, He welcomed me back in an instant, because when I made that decision to turn back to Him and to start down this path that I'm currently on, everything changed. I remember that moment. Everything changed. And it really does. It changes in an instant. Now, changing myself took some work.
Sure.
Getting rid of those habits, that took the work. And praying, reading the Bible, letting Him guide me and direct me, that's what took the work. But in an instant, He welcomed me back into the fold. I remember the moment. I remember just the change in me when that happened.
What year was that, you think, roughly?
It was when we had our conversation in that Food Line parking lot in that small little town in North Carolina when we were on our vacation. What year was it? It's I think it was 2020.
It was 2020. Yeah. Everybody's favorite year.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, something good did come out of that year, at least for me. But
it was it was quite a bit.
Yeah. So yeah, it was that moment standing in that parking lot when things changed, and it was just like a light switch. And I knew it was like a light switch, and something changed within me, and I knew what I had to do. And it was, I kind of make it sound like, it is a lot of work to change yourself, to start getting rid of those old habits and getting into the new habits of walking with the Lord. It's not hard though. It was the easiest thing I've done. Trying to break those habits on my own, that didn't work. That was difficult. Right. I did go through some growing pains there, but again, that was me trying to do it on my own, and it wasn't necessarily doing it on my own, trying to clean myself up to come to the Lord. The Lord came and got me where I was in life with all of my bad habits, with all of my sin, and he changed me. And he led me to this point where, I still sin. I probably sin every day and I don't even realize it sometimes. But, the major things, I don't carry it around with me anymore. I don't let, the enemy starts harping on me, and I do kind of fall back into that, beating myself up over certain things. But then I realize what's going on. I give it to the Lord. I confess, I repent, and I just feel the Holy Spirit swell within, and I know I'm forgiven, and I know I can put it behind me
Yeah.
and move on. And that's the biggest thing, is just trying, like I said before, forgive yourself, give it to the Lord, repent, confess, ask for forgiveness, and then put it behind you. You got to let it go, because if you carry it around with you, the enemy will use it against you.
And carrying it around with you is the same as telling him that his sacrifice wasn't good enough to actually erase it, and when it was. So by hanging on to things, you're saying that Jesus' blood is not powerful enough to take that away. Now I know nobody would really intentionally try to say that, but you have to think of it in those terms, that you really need to let it go. Because like you said, it was not just because it's better for you, but because if you insist on hanging on to stuff like that, it actually is going to cause some problems between you and the Lord, because he wants you to let go of it. And he can get a little exasperated sometimes if we continue to hang on to stuff that he has set us free from. And I've heard people talk about him saying to them at times, and speaking to them and say, "Look, I've already set you free from that. Why are you still, rolling around in this mud hole when I've already cleansed you from all this?" It's not. And he's very loving and gentle and whatnot, but at times he can let us know that where we can be our own biggest enemies, that it's not necessarily the devil that's doing it, and it's not that the Lord hasn't forgiven us, but we just continue to beat, like you said, to beat ourselves up. But it's human nature. It's nothing to be ashamed of. We just have to be on guard. It's, whether it's a golf swing, or whether it's fly fishing, or whether it's pitching in baseball, all three of those remind me a lot of the Christian walk, because you can be doing several things correctly, but if you have one little area off, if you're dropping your shoulder too much, if you're not keeping the rod tip exactly where it needs to be, if you're not doing the hips just right, then it can throw the whole thing off. And it's the Christian walk can be a little bit like that. And so it doesn't, and I'm not trying to say it's difficult or hard, but you have to keep everything in balance and monitor your situation. And it's not hard, like Jeff said, it's not difficult, but it requires your attention. And we've said that on this show right from the beginning, that while salvation is a product of grace and you cannot earn it, it's not the same as saying that maintaining a relationship with the Lord is effort free. And there's a lot of people pushing that out there, that maintaining a relationship with the Lord is an effort free endeavor. And it's not. I'm not talking about salvation. Salvation has nothing to do with our effort. But maintain any relationship takes effort with anybody, including the Lord. And if you think you're going to, get saved and then do zero to try to maintain a relationship with the Lord, it's not going to go very well. And so I'm not saying you earn your salvation, but it says, draw near to, when you seek me with all your heart, and then you will find me, is what he says. When you seek me, when that involves intention and intentionally seeking after him. And it's not works based. It's not that you all of a sudden you're saved because you've done this or what. That's not what it is. You're saved by his grace. It's lest no man should boast. However, it does take your attention and focus to keep all these pieces going. It's not hard.
Going back to what you said about the Lord, when you're, as you put it, wallowing in the mud or rolling in the mud, and you're wallowing in your self-pity, and you've given your sin to the Lord, and he's forgiven you, and you haven't let it go, and you're still kind of kicking yourself about it, and him snapping you out of that. Actually, this year alone, I've had 2 or 3 instances I remember specifically where I'm constantly, I've already given it to him. I've already repented. I've already asked for forgiveness. He's already given it to me, and I'm still holding on to it. And I'm going over it in my mind, and all of a sudden, one word, Jeff. And it's kind of like when you know you're doing something wrong and your parent comes into your room and they say your name in that way, and it's like, cut it out. Cut it out right now. And I remember 3 specific instances because, like, as I've mentioned, I'm not a perfect person. I'm nothing special. I am on this walk with the Lord. He does speak to me. 2023 has been a rough year so far as the enemy like getting at me and distracting me. And I've had 3 separate instances I remember specifically where I'm sitting there and I'm going it over in my mind and I'm either mad about it or I'm just, wallowing in my self-pity, and all of a sudden it's Jeff. And it's in that tone where you need to cut this out right now. And I'm just like, okay, I'm sorry. But it's funny because
so funny.
Well, we talk about the Lord speaking to us, and it's our thoughts and our voice, right, but it's not us. And right, that it just pops into my head. It's like, Jeff, and it's like, you better cut it out now, because it's almost like, I'm tired of hearing about this. I've already forgiven you. You need to quit. Right. And every single time I'll just be like, you're right. I'm sorry. And I let go of it and move on. But, it's just funny how you mentioned that, because those 3 instances, and it's happened before, but 3 instances just in 2023 where he, it's kind of like you're doing something in a public place, and your parent reaches over and grabs you by the back of your neck, like, you better straighten up. It's kind of one of those moments. That's kind of how it feels like you're being scolded. And you know exactly why. And, your parent has that way of saying your name in the exact right tone.
That's funny.
Where you just, you need to cut it out. But
yeah,
that was pretty much all I had for this topic. Was there anything else you wanted to add before we close it out? All right. Well, I'll close it like I normally do. We don't do this for the views or the likes or to get as many subscribers as possible. We aren't trying to make any money or profit off this channel. We're just 2 normal guys who feel like the Lord has chosen us, and not in like a chosen divine way. Maybe it is, but not like he chose, I don't know, the disciples, not in like a, we're raised up above everybody else kind of way. He has a message he wants us, me and Jerry, to convey to the world. And we feel like that's why we're here, because there are things that he wants us to get out there. And that's all we're trying to do. We're just trying to spread his message. We know we're not the only ones. We're not going to sit here and act like we're the only ones, but that's why we do this, not to get internet famous or anything like that. But we just trying to do what we think the Lord has put on us to do. And that said, if you want to subscribe to the channel, that'd be great. We'd love to have you. If we get 1 million subscribers, that'd be awesome, because it means we're getting the word out. But that's not why we do this. And hopefully it won't take us so long to get our next episode out. I don't think we've discussed a topic for that one yet, but thank you for joining us for this one. We look forward to seeing you at the next one. God bless.
God bless.